But Michael Bay had already said, and this is 1997 Michael Bay, he said, I hate CG.
I'm okay. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot we gotta unpackage there. You can't just Dave Chappelle and say you moved to Africa and. So after you were done with your time at Team 17, you got hired by Digital. What was it? Sorry, what was the name of the company?
Digital Domain.
Digital Domain, and then you started working on feature films, or was it commercials? A little bit of both.
I started in features, and I worked on the first thing I worked on was a feature called Supernova.
Yes.
Which was not that good of a film.
Not highly regarded to this day, let's just say.
They were changing story and painting and cast as they were coming up with a story, and then changing that afterwards.
It was doomed from the get-go, yeah.
It was like studio coming up with a cool idea, and the original idea was great, and then they totally just... What on earth did they do that? And we were really trying to pick up the pieces whilst that was happening. We did some great work on it, but there was also like, I remember somebody coming up and going, right, see this woman? She needs to be African American and not white.
Yeah.
But we filmed her. That's her flying,
right?
And she's naked.
Okay.
That's a white lady there. So there was those kind of things of changing stuff, and so I started on that, and I was like, oh my god, features is like, it felt nuts. That was my first one in, and it was like, this is crazy. Then I worked on the next thing after that. Worked on a Nike commercial for
Wait, was your effects in the movie was good, but the movie itself sucks? So to you, it's still kind of okay. Obviously, you'd like to be attached to a good piece of work, but you were okay in the sense that your part in that movie, your visual effects were really well made.
Oh yeah, we did. Hang on, I just need to look something up.
This is the equivalent in basketball to losing, but you had a good game. You dropped 30 points, like.
Yeah, no, we did good work, no doubt about it, and I was happy with the work that we did, and it was my first time, so I was learning tracking. I was learning the way that they have the routine of having walkthroughs all day and having timed things to show your work. And then when they say, yeah, we like this, let's get this to film and let's see it in the screening room. So they take your shot, put it to film, and then the next day you'd see it in the screening room.
That's
through
crazy.
Film on the wall.
That's
so
must be surreal almost.
It was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird. It's like, can't you just play video things? Like,
right.
No. Like, do you think video will be able to go to 2K resolution? And then of course years later it did, right. but back then film was the only way. So yeah, that was when I worked on this Nike commercial, we did this Nike commercial was so big that there was commercials for the commercial. Because the director of the commercial was Michael Bay.
Oh, what?
Yeah. It was crazy.
That's insane.
So they had these ill-timed, not completely thought out in terms of how they would be received. Incredible art, incredible fun. And we worked with this guy, the comedian, Fallon?
Jimmy Fallon?
Harlan Williams. Is that right?
Williams.
You have to look it up. And anyway, he was in this commercial. And he was called Head because there was a robot head that was detached from he lost his body.
Right.
And that was because the bike that he's running on had these shoes and they're just keeping on going and he's a robot. Anyhow, there was a series of commercials about these types of weird things happening with Nike. And I remember when one of the shots was a prosthetic head rolling down or a CG head being matched with Harlan Williams going onto a prosthetic head, and then the choice was, do we just do the 3D one or do we do the 2D one? And we nailed it. It looked great, but Michael Bay had already said, and this is 1997 Michael Bay, 1998 whatever. He said, I hate CG.
Oh,
I hate CG.
Come on, Bay.
And so when we showed him that,
Michael,
he went. Which one's CG? And I was like,
oh, yep.
I said, which one do you like? And he goes, that one. And I went, and I wasn't me. It was a group of people, and it was the the CG supervisor at the time, and he was like, "Oh, well, that one's CG," and he's like, "Still hate it." Walked away. Right?
Wow.
And then, but I was like, "Oh!" And then when they spent like $5 million on like one set, with this curiosity shop that was sprawling and incredible, and neon signs. It was unbelievable. Maybe not $5 million one set. It was $5 million for art direction.
Regardless,
whatever it was still a lot of money, right? And I remember going, "Wow, commercials! There was so much money in commercials." And then another commercial came along, and then the NT division was doing a lot more commercials. And so I was like, commercials is great because you get to try new things. And if it doesn't work, it's like, imagine if you build a machine to run a marathon and halfway through the marathon machine starts breaking. It's like, I can still run and then get through the finish line. So you would try things out and they would either work or not work or be able to be patched or fixed. And you'd learn so much more along the way. And so that's why I liked the commercials. And also, I think there was a lot of division back then from features and commercials. If you worked on features, you worked on features. And you worked in commercials, you were commercials.
Right.
You know, and they were literally in two different buildings, you know? And so, you know, all of these people I'm friends with now, but back then it was silly. We're all like idiots. And we're like, "Oh, you're dirty little commercial boy."
Right. You know, I would think it would be opposite. When you say you have freedom for commercials, I would think it would be opposite because you have to deal with brands and protecting their images and all these other corporate people getting in your, work. But
people would come to Digital Domain because we were trying new stuff.
I
see. We did the very first full CG car commercial with a CG environment.
That's crazy.
And it'd never been done before. And man, did we get some hate. As the local unions are calling up going, "Where was this shot in California?" And we're like, "No, it wasn't shot." And they're like, "Where was it shot?" I'm like, it wasn't shot. And they're like, "But this was a union job, right?" And we're like, "No."
When you start messing with people's money.
Well, we're going to have some pretty pissed off people want to know where this was filmed and they're not getting, you're not getting rep. And we're like, "Oh, this was fully CG." And they were like, "What?"
Well, we got a bigger problem now. Yeah, that's a much bigger problem.
Like, we've got bigger problems.
Next thing you know, your studio's going to get burned down the next day.
Yeah, no, so I remember there was some film people that were pissed. And we were doing so we spent as much work on doing the art direction for the environments and getting those right, and then doing the car, But so we were allowed to try all sorts of things which are standard nowadays. One of the things we did, and it might be I can't remember anyone doing it before me, that we took even back then we didn't know it was HDRs. We had this different format back then, but we took a reflection with the sun, and if you're filming a car, you want the sun to be there backlighting it, and then it looks great, and then you got the cold side on this side. But then the camera comes around to the front, and then they're like, "Oh, we see the sun here, we want it back there." So I literally put two suns in. So it looked great from there, and then it'd be cold in the middle, and then it looked great from there. And then we're like, "Oh, that's great." So we managed to do some stuff, but what we would always do is we'd add camera bumps and jiggles and add bits flying in front of the frame. And we just add them in, and it would add to the realism.
Yeah, right.
I remember one of the guys going, "I left some fingerprints on the car," and I was like, "Dude, bigger problems, but good."
Yeah,
we'd add stuff in, that would actually really, really small things. And there was a young bunch of guys that came from Station X. It was Richard Wardlow, Andy Lesniak, Rusty Ippolito, and many. There was a bunch of those guys that came that were at Digital Domain, and then after Digital Domain Titanic, they left and made their own thing called Station X. And they did some crazy work, and people kind of look at them going, "Wow, that's just like a bunch of the guys that used to be the NT guys. They all left." And I was actually brought in to fill in some of that void.
Oh, nice, right.
But then we started seeing some of the stuff. You realize that a lot of that legacy and a lot of the people were still there. So yeah, we added in stuff that would, I remember there was one of the guys, Manny, he's well known now because he does these videos that look like UFO videos or planes turning upside down videos, but it's actually not. And he has to tell people, no, it's CG. And he did this trick where he had this F-15 or F-14 plane going. We had a lamppost just swoosh inside, and then the focus went. He just defocused a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time that I'd seen a CG camera defocus.
Fake defocus, wow.
So then when we were, a lot of the times when we had guys and we were learning about CG and the weight of a real camera, getting a weight on your, if you learned with that and then actually seeing, oh, that's why the camera reacts. That's why the camera has inertia, because you've got a big shoulder mounted camera. Adding all those things in, I think we did a lot of that in the commercials division, which really helped add a lot to our way of like, why does that look good?
It's crazy to think that CG or special effects in general has gone so far now that like in Scorsese movies you have like a weird digitally animated De Niro, and it's funny that Michael Bay was so against this. Maybe he was part of the union, the union you were talking about, because now all his movies are like 95% CGI and all that.
Well, yeah, he went. I mean, he's a very opinionated, but will change his mind. He's kind of a scientist. He'll be very opinionated about something, but if different data comes along that shows, oh, this is different, then he's like, oh, that data that I just said before is invalid. I'm now going in this direction. So when CG actually got to a stage where it was reliably good and fast and shiny and would give him everything he wants, he's totally on board, of course. And I think that's a good scientific approach to things. David Fincher is exactly the same. He would always try new stuff all the time. And he'd be sometimes vehemently opinionated about certain things. And then when you show him a different way, he'd say, yep, that's right. And he'd leave all the emotion of it behind. Sometimes the annoyance. And Jim Cameron is kind of like that too. He would be very passionate about something, but then if something is a better way over there, he will drop all that emotion and almost every memory of having arguments with people and go, no, we're just doing this now. And everyone's like, I'm still arguing about the last thing,
Yeah, you almost have to be that kind of guy to be at that kind of at the top of the food chain.
Well, that's right. And that's why that kind of scientific, when new data arrives, we change our mind if we need to. That kind of approach to technology and filmmaking is a more healthy. It's
an engineering approach almost.
Yeah, because something else comes up and it's better. And so I remember way back in the day when we were doing these, we could front projection from the camera. So we would sometimes match up a scene and then take a picture from a camera and then spew it from the camera with the right angle and then match it back in, right? And go, all right, boom, we've now matched that. So we can now move around inside the room with no CG needed.
Wow.
We didn't realize that those techniques were going to be called something else later on.
Yeah.
And like, so this whole virtual environment thing that everyone's doing, the idea and thoughts and even stuff written down, it goes way back to the late 90s. It's just that the technology is now finally caught up. And it does bug me somewhat when people come along and say, we invented this. It's like, no, the technology has now just come to a place that we can do it. But the idea of having an LED wall and something driving the camera, that's 20 years old. It's ancient. The manipulation and the way of it being done with Unreal and all that, it's different implementation, but the idea of
the fundamental concept.
They imagine if you can light a character with LEDs and you move the camera around and the LEDs change. That's 20 years old.